Candy hearts and hidden messages. Valentine's Day. Probably the day I hate most of all. Why, you may ask? It's ridiculous. All you do is give candy to those you love, and everywhere you look, there are cheesy couples being all lovey-dovey with each other. Definitely the most overrated holiday out there. As I made my way through town to school, I saw that the local farmers market had transformed into a mini Valentine's fair, with stalls of flowers, chocolates, and plush toys. Great! Even the market wasn't safe from this holiday. Guess I'll be heading to the store out of town later. As I tried to weave through the clusters of roses and piles of heart-shaped balloons, I noticed a small understated stall with an older woman seated behind it. Her table wasn't covered with fancy chocolates or massive teddy bears, just small bags of candy hearts, the kind with messages like "Be mine" or "Love you." I found myself drawn to the little table, standing awkwardly in front of the neatly arranged candies. "Hello, dear," the woman greeted warmly. "Would you like a bag of heart candy?" I tried to politely decline, but she persisted with a gentle smile. "They're free. No need to pay me, just enjoy your day." Reluctantly, I took a small bag, giving her a quick thank you before heading off to school. When I arrived, I knew it was going to be a long, irritating day. Students were slipping love notes into lockers, girls were squealing over chocolates, and couples were holding hands or kissing in the hallways. Lovely. I walked into my first class, and the room was decorated with red and pink hearts plastered on the walls. Even the teachers were in on this holiday. I took my usual seat and tried to ignore the festive atmosphere. "All right, class," our teacher announced. "Today's a retake day since it's Valentine's. If you're happy with your grades, you can work on other assignments." Well, at least it would be an easy day. As the class dragged on, many students took the opportunity to pass out candy to their friends. I glanced over at two girls a few seats down. "I can't do it," one of them whispered urgently. "Come on, you have to." "If you don't, I'll tell him myself," the other teased. Must be nice having someone to share all this with. I reached into my hoodie pocket for my phone, but instead, I pulled out the bag of candy hearts. I'd almost forgotten about it. With nothing else to do, I started eating them, ignoring the usual sweet messages. But after a while, curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced at one. It was a light purple heart, and instead of a typical phrase, it read, "4:30 p.m. I stared at the candy, puzzled. 4:30 p.m.? What kind of message was that? Weird, but maybe it was a mistake. Just then, the bell rang and the students rushed out. Between classes, I stopped at my locker to grab my history book for my next period. While I gathered my things, I overheard the two girls from earlier talking nearby. "So when are you going to do it?" one asked. "Maybe around 4:30, when he's usually cleaning up in the gym," the other replied. "Wait, 4:30? It had to be a coincidence, right?" I shook my head and headed to my next class, trying to ignore the strange feeling in my chest. It was lunchtime, and my usual bench in the courtyard was taken by a group of kids. Not wanting to argue or find a new spot, I tossed my lunch away and went outside to a quieter part of the school. They usually let us roam as long as we were back before the bell. I sat on an old bench near the garden and pulled out the bag of candy hearts. I thought back to the strange message from earlier. Maybe it was just random. I picked up a yellow heart this time and it read, "School." Well, no kidding, I was already at school. I sighed, thinking it was all nonsense. But then I picked up another heart which said, "Garden." I rolled my eyes at the cryptic message. But as I turned to leave, I accidentally dropped a green heart that rolled near my science book, which I'd forgotten on the bench. The heart read, "Science book." How did it know that I was forgetting my book? Was this all a coincidence? My mind was spinning. After school, I couldn't stop thinking about the candy. I was so lost in thought while getting my things from my locker that I didn't notice the time until my watch beeped. It was 4:25 p.m. The message flashed in my mind for 30 school garden. There was a small garden behind the school. Should I go there? With curiosity getting the better of me, I walked to the back of the school towards the garden. As I rounded the corner, I saw one of the girls from earlier. She stood there looking at a boy. "I like you," she said quietly. The boy hesitated, then spoke gently. "I'm sorry. I just don't feel that way." I watched as the girl's shoulders slumped, and she tried to hold back her tears. She sat on a nearby bench looking devastated. I felt a pang of sympathy. Even if I didn't understand the hype around Valentine's Day, I knew what it felt like to be alone. "Hey, are you all right?" I asked softly, approaching her. She glanced up at me, quickly wiping her eyes. "Do you want some candy?" I offered, holding out the bag of candy hearts. She hesitated, then took a piece. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat down beside her, giving her some space but offering a quiet presence. "You know, he's not the only person out there," I said gently. "You deserve someone who will see how amazing you are." She glanced over at me, a small shy smile tugging at her lips. "Thanks," she murmured, and our eyes met for a moment. I felt my cheeks warm a little, and I could see a soft blush spreading across hers too. As we sat there, sharing candy hearts in the fading afternoon light, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this Valentine's Day wouldn't be so bad after all. As we sat together on the bench, the tension from the earlier rejection began to lift a little. The girl, whose name I eventually learned was Maddie, opened up bit by bit. She shared how nervous she'd been to confess her feelings, how she'd been preparing for weeks, only to have it end like this. "I know I probably shouldn't have said anything," she muttered, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. "I just thought, maybe I'd have a chance, you know?" I nodded, feeling the weight of her disappointment. "I think it's really brave that you put yourself out there, Maddie," I said quietly, glancing down at the bag of candy hearts between us. "A lot of people don't even try. They just keep everything inside, but you were honest. That's pretty amazing." Maddie gave me a small, appreciative smile, though her eyes were still a bit puffy. "Thanks, what's your name, by the way?" "Oh, I'm Casey," I replied, realizing how odd it was that we'd been talking for a while without even knowing each other's names. I tried to change the subject, not wanting her to dwell on the rejection any longer. "So, do you always hang out in school gardens? Or is this a new hobby?" Maddie let out a soft laugh, her shoulders relaxing a little. "No, just today, I guess. I thought it would be the perfect spot to, make my confession. I didn't realize I'd have an audience." She glanced at me, an apologetic look crossing her face. "Sorry you had to see that, by the way." I shrugged. "It's okay. I'm usually just the quiet one who observes everyone else. And besides, if I hadn't come out here, I wouldn't have met you." I reached into the bag and handed her another candy heart. This one read "Smile More." She glanced at it, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "All right, Casey, I'll try," she said, popping the candy into her mouth. We talked for a while longer, just sitting in the garden as the afternoon light began to fade. The awkwardness of the earlier encounter slowly melted away, replaced by something quieter and more genuine. Maddie told me about her passion for art and how she hoped to go to art school after graduation. I shared my own struggles with feeling out of place, especially on days like today when it seemed like everyone else had someone special. As it turned out, Maddie and I had more in common than I expected. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't completely alone in my thoughts. Eventually, I had to head home, and we exchanged numbers before parting ways. The next day at school, I found myself looking for Maddie in the hallways. I spotted her by her locker, and she waved when she saw me, a shy smile on her face. It was nice, this new connection, even if it felt a little fragile, like a delicate flower blooming in winter. "Hey, how are you feeling today?" I asked when I reached her. She shrugged but looked a little brighter than yesterday. "Better, I think. Thanks again for sitting with me. It meant a lot." "Anytime," I replied. "Honestly, I'm kind of glad I bumped into you." Maddie hesitated for a moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small sketchbook. "I made this for you," she said, her voice a little shy. She handed it to me, and I opened it to find a simple drawing of two figures sitting on a bench, sharing a bag of candy hearts. The scene from yesterday. "Wow, Maddie, it's really good." I smiled, touched by the gesture. She shrugged again, but there was a small, pleased smile playing on her lips. "I just thought it would be a nice way to say thank you." I glanced at the sketch again, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. It was strange, this feeling like I was finally being seen. "You know, you're really talented. You'll do great at art school," I said earnestly. She laughed softly. "Only if I managed to survive the rest of high school first." We shared a chuckle, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away, leaving just the two of us and the possibility of something new. The days that followed felt lighter. Maddie and I started hanging out more often, during lunch, after school, even texting late into the night about everything from our favorite TV shows to the annoying quirks of our teachers. It was easy being around her, and she seemed to find comfort in my presence too. One afternoon, about a week after Valentine's Day, I found myself sitting with Maddie in the garden again. The candy hearts had become a kind of running joke between us, each of us reading the silly messages aloud and making up funny stories about them. But there was one candy that had been sitting in the bottom of the bag, untouched. It was a pink one with the words "Take a Chance" written on it. Maddie noticed it too, her gaze lingering on the candy. She picked it up and turned it over in her fingers, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it means something?" I laughed softly, though my heart was suddenly beating a little faster. Who knows? Maybe the candy is some kind of magical fortune teller. She smiled, but there was a nervousness in her eyes that made my own heart skip a beat. "Casey, can I ask you something?" "Sure, anything," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Maddie looked down at the candy, then back up at me. I think I want to take that chance." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the words hung in the air between us, fragile and full of hope. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure what I felt, scared, excited, nervous. But then I thought back to that first message, 4:30 p.m., and all the little moments that had led us here. Maybe it was time for me to take a chance to. I reached out and gently closed her hand around the candy heart. "Yeah, me too," I said softly. A small, shy smile spread across Maddie's face, and I could feel my own cheeks warming. It wasn't some grand, sweeping romance like in the movies. It was just us, sitting together in a quiet garden, taking a chance on something new. And for the first time, Valentine's Day didn't seem so bad after all. Summary: Casey and Maddie, two high school students with little in common beyond their mutual dislike of Valentine's Day, are brought together by a mysterious bag of candy hearts. As they navigate awkward confessions, unexpected friendships, and a growing connection, they discover that sometimes the best surprises come when you take a chance.